strings, like thousands of different kind of fudge strings that you just like use.
So those are available inside of Python classes. So if you wanted to pull all the values for doing active SQL injection, you could do it into a variable name, and then you could iterate over the top of those values, so you don't have to go out to separate libraries or read in different files. It started off just being an implementation of FuzzDB, but quickly grew into something larger. So I actually took the encoder lib from Dharma encoder and included it there as well, because when you're iterating through those values, you might want to add an encoding type to them or represent that data differently. It also has request logic built into it, and I haven't pushed the code back, but so when you're doing the Cartesian product method that we talked about before, it creates a dictionary. Well, you can't pass a dictionary value for post data in URL2, so I created a web string method, so you just pass the dictionary to the web string and it'll properly encode that for you. So you can do some custom range. We're not going to go into the examples, but there is a wiki on the Google Code page, so I don't know how well it'll help you, so you might want to send me an email or something.
Or just explore it, you know.
Yeah. Sequenced operations are a particular pain when you're doing your testing. Because if the tools you're using don't understand the sequences, you know, and a lot of tools are starting to support these, but they're supporting them via, you know, names. So pretty much every single tool out there, every single commercial tool uses replay. So if you can't replay the data, you're pretty much screwed. So you might have randomized values. So if you think of like laying out a web page for a bank, and it might have, you know, home, account, all these different menu options. Well, if underneath those menu options is a randomized value that changes every single time, that's going to throw your tools off. But when you're writing your own clients, I mean, you know how to handle that. So you're becoming intimately familiar with the application. There's also things that tools take care of for you that you might not think about, such as processing headers, processing cookies, adding referrers, and there might be content that you just can't parse. You're just going to have to resort back to regular expressions for that stuff. It's not fun.
Then you got two problems, right?
Yeah. Has anybody ever heard of Selenium? How many people that have heard of Selenium know that you can write these test cases in Python? Oh, you did? Nice.
Awesome.
So Selenium in WebDriver, has anybody ever heard of WebDriver? Okay, so those projects are merging, which is nice because it gives some advantages to doing that. Has anybody ever heard of Windmill? I figured about as much. It's like Selenium, but it's written in Python. So it's kind of nice. I had some frustrations with Windmill, so obviously it would be nice to like do everything in Python, but the frustration just set in and I went back to Selenium. So Selenium has a couple of components. Has the server component, the remote control, and the IDE. The IDE is nice. It's a Firefox plugin, and as you're clicking through the web application, it's recording what you're doing and writing out your Python code for you. So at that point, all you have to do is take that Python code, copy and paste it into your IDE, and then start writing your test cases around it. When you fire up Selenium, it will go ahead and open the browser and start taking those actions that you programmed in. So I think it's pretty easy to see how you could sequence your operations that way and use the browser. The browser is going to process all the JavaScript and do all the dirty work for you. And in the end, your goal was to test for SQL injection on a form value or test for cross-site scripting or something like that. So we have a nice picture of Tom Selleck. So we have a little demo. Behind it. Obviously it doesn't fit on the screen. So here we have a bank website, and we want to do some testing. So we're going to open up Selenium IDE, and we're gonna basically choose Python as our format. So as you can see, it already sets up, does some imports. Now I'm clicking on different things that you can't see. So there's like a sequence of operations going on, and you can see the IDE is filling out. So now we get to a login, and it really doesn't matter what we log in with, basically.
So like you guys came here expecting to like get some Python code out of this. Like we're not even like doing code right now.
So as you can see, it basically built a case for us. So if we copy and paste that into our IDE, we can then run like a for loop over the top of a sequence and test for certain values. So here we have a single quote, a semicolon, and then 1 equals 1. So we fire up the server. That's fine. And then we run our test case, which was test fire sequence. And once we do that, Selenium will then go ahead and launch the browser for us and take all those actions. As you can see, it's running open. And all I did was say get body text instead of get HTML source because it would be easier to read. So we ran a test case. We basically threw 3 values at it. If you look at the return from the first one, you can see there's a SQL error message. You see the strings. The second one, as you can see, it looks like just a standard error message. Now the third one, it says, I want to view my account summary. So now we know we had a valid case. So we detected the error first with the first one, and the second one you can see we exploited the SQL injection. All in a couple lines of code. So we were able to test drive the browser, you know, create our sequence, and then break into that sequence and do tests. That's pretty simple, right? Okay, you're supposed to say yes. All right.
So one of the things that I like to use Burp when testing web apps. Besides being a great proxy, there's a lot of other stuff in Burp that makes it really cool. One of the things that I really like it for is I can record like a proxy log. Basically record into a text file all my requests and responses. The thing that web scanners, basically everyone that's building web scanner spends too much time trying to make it better at spidering. That's too hard for me. So whatever, I'll just click through the app and hit every single link that I can and submit every post I could. So the thing about getting a good crawl log, when you're testing, you have all this context to you. And that's one of the things that web scanners don't really provide for you when you're testing. You have no idea what it's doing behind the hood. So I like to just work off that. So I got a remote. What I did was basically I wrote this API. I call it the GDS Burp API. Basically allows me to parse a Burp proxy log, and then every request and response basically gets bundled up into what I call a Burp Object. So a Burp Object basically looks like this. You have the request properties, the response properties, the time, the URL, and the parameters that you sent it. Basically everything that Burp recorded to the log. The thing that say you have an index number here, 123. If you look in your Burp history session, this number 123 would match up with 123 in your history. So you could easily go back and forth. But basically you have all this data now available to you in an API that you can now just call various methods on and get data from or for build context. What am I saying?
It's always nice when the presenter says, what am I saying?
So I was at Black Hat and Ben Nagy gave a presentation on fuzzing, and he kind of made the comment that everyone writes their own fuzzing engine because everybody else's sucks. And that's kind of what I think with web scanners. Unless I wrote it or whatever, I have no idea what the web scanner is doing. I don't really have time to dive into the internals of various web app scanners. The other thing is like I said before, I don't have enough context to what a web scanner is doing at a particular time. So they don't do enough actual testing, and they do too much hand-holding. And that's as testers, whatever.
That's what that's what you're supposed to be doing, right? As testers, it's up to us to make sure that we properly explored every path. So when you have a vuln scanner, sometimes you don't know if it's doing all the right things. I mean, there was one particular vuln scanner who will remain nameless that was encoding all its cross-site scripting data wrong. So as it sent it off, as you know, in cross-site scripting, that could be very bad. So there's a bunch of vulnerabilities that never got identified until they fixed it.
So basically, I have with the API, basically, it's the way I work. It makes stuff, all the context in my crawl log available to me in these Python objects. So what can we actually do with the API? Basically, you can do comparisons, like compare two proxy logs. Say you crawled an application as a user in one session, and then you did it again as like an administrator. It's really useful to do a comparison of like the URLs that were requested, the parameters that were submitted. You could just do a diff, and then like actually replay those request objects as say like that user level for the administrator page, and easily see like what worked, what didn't. Comparing responses and content lengths of different requests. You have two users submit a request to the same page, but they have different content lengths. Let's like compare them, like why. Obviously, searching through responses for particular keywords. And the other nice thing I found is, say you have like a sequenced operation, like we said earlier, you have a login operation, or say like some cart checkout sequence that might span like 5 to 6, 7 requests. Basically, we can pull out specific objects from our list and replay them in order, out of order, and just fuzz stuff along the way. So basically, you're creating what web scanners, the commercial vendors call macros. So I find it really useful for that.
Yeah, you can also do state maintenance as well. So if you're checking for state, like let's say you're making a request every so often to make sure that you see the word log off on your application. If it notices that the word log off doesn't happen anymore, you can run your sequence and relog back in and maintain state. And that's something that some web scanners have a little bit of a problem with too, is falling out of state. So how do you know when the scanner is really fallen out of state unless you're looking at a verbose list of messages?
So replaying a request is just as simple as like, say with HTTP lib2, basically we just pass the object to it and call various methods on it to get the original data from. And basically this is just replaying that burp object as it was in one line of code, really. I know there's like 3, but.
Okay, that was funny.
So, how many people here are familiar with difflib in the Python standard library? Nobody. 2, 4, 5, 3. 6, 7, 8, 9. So basically, say you got like, we're adding or subtracting. Say you got like 2 responses. We could compare those responses in like a diff style output and just easily see in the response like what was changed down to like the actual character, like per byte level with this module. So makes for a nice, really visual representation of what's changed. So we've got a demo. I'm just showing a couple things with the API.
Which side do you need?
That side's fine.
Right.
So on the right, I just have like an open burp log. I'm just importing the GDS Burp API. I'm going to import some logging and just do some logging so you actually see what's going on. Yeah, that's good. Can you guys all see that? No? Oh, damn. So basically right here I'm parsing a burp log. I'm just calling gds.burp.parse. Basically I parsed out all the burp objects. Scroll down, dude. And here I'm just printing out the request properties with pprint. Can you move down?
I'm trying to.
Okay. Max. Here I'm just calling the get request headers on the second item in my list. I get all the headers that I parsed out. Here I just get a single request header, the user agent. Right now I'm going to do the fuzz all the requests. Basically just sent it through. And each replayed request gets appended to a .replayed property, basically a list, and then you can just call out those request properties